Well, that's great. We're live and welcome to our Lunch and Learn seminar today with Cause Leadership. My name is Dave Hutchinson. I just want to welcome everybody here today, and particularly our panelists, but everyone who's joining us today as a participant in the webinar. The panelists are going to introduce themselves in just a moment, but just as we set up for today, when you consider the charitable sector and the challenges that it faces on a regular basis, certainly when you look at inflationary times like what we're experiencing today, coming through the pandemic and still in many ways dealing with that, and the realities that the donors are facing and that the general charitable sector is facing. We have with us today a group of panelists who touch on food security, on donor advisors and wealth management, as well as restorative justice. And so it's a real mix of sizes of organizations and the kinds of people that they all deal with. But as we look at the future and over the next few months particularly, we just wanted to get their impressions on where the market was at from a giving perspective, and today being Giving Tuesday, and us coming into a season of giving as we come close to the holidays. We're cognizant of the fact that it can be challenging to raise money for charitable impact these days. But at the same time, we also recognize that there are some very generous donors out there who are continuing to give. And so our perspective today will be from all three of the panelists, and we're just grateful for you to join us today. So thank you for that. And Jim, I'll just pass it over to you.
Yeah, hi, I'm Jim Foster, Managing Director here at Cause Leadership, and just love these conversations that we can have with other leaders and to try to bring value to each one of us about these kind of matters, and how to lead and secure sufficient donations and partners during inflationary times is really key to most of us. So hope that you'll be able to take away some really excellent value, insights into what's happening right now and how it affects us, each of us in our organizations. Today, we have two of our three panelists. One has not been able to make it online yet, but we're hoping she will. But we have, and I'd like to ask each of them to introduce themselves. So we have Rick Wood joining us from Caldwell Securities. Rick?
Thank you, Jim. So I am the Vice President of Client and Advisor Success with Caldwell Securities, where my responsibilities are the client experience, as well as I'm responsible for the training and development of the next generation of investment advisors.
That's awesome. Thank you, Rick, for joining us today with your perspective from investors and donors and partners. Over to Neil. We have Neil Hetherington also joining us. Why don't you introduce yourself, Neil?
Hi, everybody. So Neil Hetherington, I have the awesome privilege of being the CEO of the Daily Bread Food Bank. We're Canada's largest food bank, providing food to about 200 food banks across the city of Toronto, and are really struggling to keep up with demand. And I'm sure we'll touch base on that, but just in terms of kind of a rough figure of where things are at. Before the pandemic, we used to serve about 60,000 clients every month. That number last month was 190,000 clients. And it continues to rise with our forecast being at 250,000 in Toronto every month having to make use of a food bank. So certainly there is a need out there, and I'm sure we'll talk about how we might be able to address that need.
Yeah,
that's great. Well, our third panelist, Stacey Campbell, may be able to join us, but we'll have her introduce herself when she joins up. So for those of you who are watching, I'd like you to say if you have questions for the panelists throughout the call here and would like to post them in the chat. If we have the time here at the end before the 12:45 closing time, we will post those questions back to the panelists on your behalf. So feel free, as they're going through their sharing, to post up some questions for them. So back to Dave to just kind of put us, where are we going with the conversation here today, the exact discussion?
Yeah, so as I mentioned in my introduction, we just really recognize that charities today are making a huge impact in our society, and certainly coming through the pandemic, as we saw, and Neil's already mentioned, the huge need as it relates to frontline work like food security at such a significant time for that, and the investment that Daily Bread needs to make in that. And then with Rick representing, individuals who are of capacity and able to assist during times of need like this. Especially as we look to the future, though, we wanted to get a better sense from you guys as to what you're hearing from either your clients or the people that you're serving, what you're seeing as far as donor impact, continued donor impact, because many of them really stepped up 2 years ago, as we saw. Are they still able to do so and are willing to? What are you seeing that way? And how is it impacting the sort of the day-to-day operations of the charities? And then Rick, as it relates to the individuals that you're dealing with who help support these. And really, I would say, Rick, as well, some of the economic elements that you're seeing in the marketplace today is around investment and we're certainly, Bank of Canada is trying to deal with inflation. Investors are trying to deal with all of the changes that are going on that way. So your perspective on that would be great as well. So this is really just an opportunity for us all to learn from you and to get a better sense of how we can continue to support charitable impact organizations like Daily Bread and others as we look over the next few months and into the next year.
So to start, we're going to ask the panelists to kind of give their State of the Union statement, kind of a foundational, what's the situation with partnerships and donations, and from your perspective, describing the situation in your organization or your sector, how it relates to establishing consistent funding for your organizations. So what do we need to know just from your own context? And Rick, I'm going to invite you to start with the perspective of an economy observer like you and a service provider to donors and investors. Just let us know your perspective as we start.
Sure, thank you, Jim. I guess, and I'm going to be speaking from the perspective of an advisor who currently works with clients to help them make charitable donations and that as part of a wealth plan. And I think, we're all dealing with the backdrop of high inflation. The economy is sputtering and there's a lot of question marks as far as that and coming off the backs of COVID. But I will say in my experience, and I've been doing this job for over 30 years, the State of the Union is good. I probably have not seen it be as positive, I guess, when I'm speaking with my clients and we're working with them towards charitable giving than ever in the history that I've been an advisor. It's absolutely been fantastic, and it is something that is very much peace of mind. So a lot of the clients that we deal with would be considered what we would say high net worth clients or the ultra high net worth clients. These are clients for high net worth, which would have about 5 million of investable assets, and the ultra high net worth would be your family offices, 30 million or more. And truly, charitable giving is very much a part of their entire wealth management program. And it is part of what we do when we sit down with clients and that. And some of the changes that I'm seeing currently with a lot of the clients are, it's not so much in the sense of, how much we're going to leave to our kids. It's changing. And a lot of clients that we're dealing with now are saying, you know what, we're going to contribute to our kids while we're alive. We're going to help them, maybe with a home purchase, their education, or those sort of things. And but really, we're not interested necessarily in leaving that legacy to them later on in life. We're more interested in how do we do this as part of a wealth plan and giving to a cause that resonates with us and we really connect with in that. And so for my job, it's to be able to put that into that financial planning. How do we do it? What is the most tax effective strategy that we can do it? For some of the clients, they may create foundations or things like that. One of the things we're looking at here is creating a donor advised foundation at our firm to allow people to basically, connect their hearts with their wallets in being able to do those sort of things. But a lot of the work that we're doing right now is to be able to help people as part of a true wealth management structure to be able to give the way they want to do it. And again, as I said, this is more and more what we're seeing now. It may be different, I think, for the what we would call the mass affluent, where clients are not necessarily regular givers through a financial planning process, and that they probably are going to be more affected by where the economy is, and they're more directly affected, with inflation and where money can go. But for clients that are in that high net worth part and in the financial planning that we do, our job as advisors is to make sure that those plans continue to go as they expect, regardless of what the backdrop of the economy is. And so really, we're building out the ability to provide for them. But I would say, truly right now, the pandemic has been great. Believe it or not, I think for a lot of folks, they may have felt that, they lost control over things that they were doing in their day-to-day life during the pandemic. And talking with us about making charitable contributions where they feel that they can have a significant opportunity to do those things has become very much important to them. And those conversations are coming up more and more. As we get towards the end of the year, we're talking about certain tax planning, but I will share this with you that, there was a recent survey that was done by Bank of New York Mellon, and they were looking at the reasons why people are doing things towards charities. And from my point of view, tax planning and investment planning, it was really a small amount of people, maybe 45% of people were looking at that. But personal satisfaction was probably the number one thing of why people chose to do those things. And so those are the things that really are important to them. And so we're seeing, how can we help them, make an impact in something that means something to them, something that they connect with within the charity. And also the other part of it is, how do we do it within our families? So, they're bringing in that second generation of people saying, look, we want you involved with this. This is some of the giving that we're going to be doing. And it's important for us that you get involved with it. For me as an advisor, those relationships with the second generation of my clients are very important, because we're going to see a great wealth transfer of trillions of dollars over the next decade or so. So how do we, build those relationships? And charitable giving is one of those places where we can really, bring them at the table, sitting down with mom and dad and put together what that plan is and how we're going to be able to do it. So I would say from our perspective and working with our clients and the work we do, it's very positive. We've not seen situations where people would look at pausing. More so, it's now more than ever, it's important to be able to donate and to help people and to provide those type of services and donations for that. So it's a lot different than it was, I think, when I was younger, when I was in this industry. And people are working with advisors. Contributions are part of a wealth strategy. They're making those things, and they want to have a personal impact and connection, and also involve the next generation.
That's so great, Rick. Thank you so much for that perspective. It's so encouraging to hear that many are continuing to give and increasingly looking for better ways to give. So I'm going to turn to Neil now, and just a recent CTV News article, just November 12th, quoted a recent NANO survey that had done on giving patterns across Canada. And it was quite a positive take on a larger percentage of Canadians are planning to give more or continue to consistently give. Certainly different sectors were giving different pieces. If you want to look that up, it's a CTV News article, November 12th, but it states some good trends in each of the provinces on giving. It states that those 55 and above were planning, to actually give more than what they had given last year. Those aged 35 to 54 were planning, majority were planning to, a smaller majority were planning to give more, but at least steady. And so it looks positive, but some of those, let's agree that some of those on the call here today may be from organizations that are not seeing, an increase in giving. And so what we're wanting to do today is kind of find out what do we need to know to kind of readdress or pivot towards where the giving is now, as maybe givers and partnerships are transforming in a post-pandemic world. And so Neil, I just wanted to invite you from a wonderful perspective that you have of a charitable organization, yes, dependent upon donations and volunteers to assist with food security in urban communities here in Canada. And so give us a sense from your perspective of how the economy is affecting you.
Well, I'm a very optimistic guy, but I'm going to be like the grumpy pants on this panel, I think, for the next half hour, and here's why. Because people are hurting right now. So I mentioned that the number of individuals who are coming to the food bank now. To serve that need, we've had to increase our food budget from $1.5 million a year to $18 million a year. And our fundraising has had to increase from about $8.5 million to just under $30 million annually. And we've been able to do that. And there is a lot of generosity across the country. Here's the reason why, and I don't have an Ipsos Reid poll to support this, but here's why I think it's happening. I think it's happening because poverty is touching more people than ever before, because affordability, we mask it as affordability, but when we talk about, will your kids be able to go to university and then get that job and buy the house of their own? The reality is that's probably not going to be their circumstance. And so there are those kitchen table conversations that people are having because it's closer to home. The highest number of food bank users, the largest growth of food bank users are people with full-time jobs. That doubled year over year. The number of people who are coming to food banks who work full-time doubled. And I see it all the time. You see more and more, I used to talk about, who's coming to food banks. I would say, well, it's the person sitting beside you on the streetcar or the bus. It's the person across the cubicle from you who's going to a food bank. Yesterday, I was down at the CBC, and they have a process where you have to check in, and then somebody actually has to come down and bring you up to the studio. And the person taking me there said, thank you. She is currently making use of a food bank. She's got a couple of kids, and she's a producer. And, getting that first job of maybe it's $50,000, $50,000, what we thought was a good starting salary. You take away a couple $1,000 for rent, you overlay some debt with interest rate payments increasing, and suddenly your disposable incomes isn't what it had been. And so Rick is serving a great purpose to be able to essentially assist people in divesting of some of their wealth, to be able to provide it to charities that are needing it. Because I can tell you from an individual perspective, the people who were, like the Bernie Sanders kinds of donors, who were donating sort of $10 a month, maybe it's $8 a month now. But those major gifts, the ones with donor advisors, have actually increased substantially. And I'm terribly grateful for that, because the need is significant. Here's the thing we do with those donors, though, who are not able to continue to provide as they would normally. We link them intrinsically with our advocacy strategy. So it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter if you got a college education, a fancy car, a great place. We can all send an email to an elected representative and say, you got to implement your poverty reduction strategy. And so that donor might not be a donor of cash right now. It might not be a donor of food or of time, because that is also a treasured commodity. But everybody can be an advocator, because we got to reduce the lineups, whether it's at the shelters, we have to reduce the lineups there, or outside of a food bank. And so as things hit home, people recognize it and are willing to donate. Ipsos had a poll out last week, I think it was Ipsos, saying 47% of Canadians would rather get a gift made in their name this holiday season than an actual gift. and that's encouraging.
Mm.
And so you got to look at these little bits of hope, but also ask the questions: why systemically do we have to rely on philanthropy to be able to make the change that we need?
Right. So can I ask you then maybe a follow-up question? Trends seem to show giving patterns are good and increasing, but if I hear what you're saying, there's so much more need, and the need for social services like yours to address the growing increase of your clientele is actually outstripping even the somewhat steady giving that's been happening. Is that fair?
Yeah, certainly need has increased dramatically. Donations have not kept pace, but where they were particularly generous was when we were all clanging pots every day at 7 o'clock outside of our doors. And we were clanging the pots in support of essential workers. We got together with telethons. We said we've got to do something to support those in the healthcare practice and those on the front lines serving people who had nothing at the start of the pandemic and were confined to home. But here's where we fell down. And again, going back to my grumpy pantsness, we were banging the pots and said, there is no way that we will carry on as is. We promised one another that we would build back better, but we didn't. And so when the acute shock of inflation happened, we weren't prepared for it, as people were maybe just gaining ground and maybe they were starting to repay debt that they had incurred. You have 11.5% inflation on food, and suddenly that number is not 120,000, because we doubled the number. So again, our numbers 60,000 before the pandemic, 120 during the pandemic. We went from 120 to 190,000 in the last 8 months, largely because of inflation. And so we didn't keep the promise of building back better. But again, everybody on this call can shoot an email to their elected official. In fact, Jim, I'm going to ask that we end the call a minute and a half early, if you and Dave agree, so that people can spend that minute and a half and just send a note saying, you got to implement your poverty reduction strategy, because it's not sustainable the way that it is, despite the fact that there has been generosity.
Very good. Thank you, Neil. That's great.
So did you agree to that, by the way?
Yes.
We're ending this a minute and a half
Yes.
We will.
early? Cool.
Minute and a half.
So
Maybe, Neil, just before we stop on that, like, who should they reach out to? Is it their provincial representative, municipal, federal, all of them?
It really doesn't matter which one. All 3 levels of government have a poverty reduction strategy. And here's the thing, it's in your best economic interest to have that strategy implemented. Poverty costs Ontario $33 billion a year. If we want a healthy workforce, if we want affordable housing, if we want workers to be near a place of employment, then we need to invest in a poverty reduction strategy. It just makes good financial sense.
So let me ask you, both of you, to speak to what is needed. Neil, you've given a solution or one step towards that to reach out to our political leaders. But what are some other ways to address the need for greater support for those in the sector? Maybe and I'm going to turn this back to in terms of the let's at this point say how to, in terms of donations, in terms of partnerships, in terms of people and getting engaged, maybe from both your perspectives. So I'll go back to Rick and ask Rick, from your perspective, how do we go back to our base and encourage people to increase their engagement, increase their giving? What are the approaches you're taking?
Well, I think, as we said, it has to be something that connects to people and what is important to them. And I think what we have to do is build the connection so that they understand the situation and that. And, Neil, has provided us such great insight in the sense of going and talking to somebody who would have what would be considered a fantastic job, but yet needing to access the food bank. So there's something that is broken there inherently. When one thinks that we're a great occupation and you should be able to to help others. those that maybe were helping others are now the ones that we need to help as well. And I think from that point of view, as an organization ourselves, how do we work with people to make sure that, they're not the people that need to do those things, and put them in a foundation where that they can be somebody that supports it and that. But I think really it is making an awareness and a connection for people so that they understand the reality of what is out there, and what is happening now. I think before we got on this, I was mentioning how in our office, we were down in the office all through COVID. But when I was walking into the office every day, we would see the homelessness on the streets like we had never seen before, all during COVID and the pandemic, and people that were completely forgotten, and sort of pushed aside in those things. That hasn't changed. As more people are going back nowadays, we're seeing more and more of it. So, it's disheartening to see so many people that are in need. It's great that people are stepping up to be able to do things, but we need to find ways where everybody is able to make those contributions, whether it is at the government level, dealing with poverty alleviation, working with clients, and me as an advisor, and being able to have conversation with clients and saying, we work with a lot of wealthy clients that sometimes don't even have the notion that they have more than they ever really need, and having a conversation saying, hey, you know what, why don't we try to do something where, you can make a legacy towards something that's important to you, and give and do those things. But I think as advisors in my community, we need to step up and have those conversations and let people know that, we can help you with these things. We can put them in place. And I guess too, in talking about, for financial planners and certified financial planners, and calling out to those, we should be able to do these things regardless of what's happening within the economy, because there are many tools for us to be able to risk protect people for what they want to do through different vehicles and structures. So put the planning in place where we can make sure that we can provide those things. But I think really educating people, empowering people to do something, and connecting them with things that are important to their heart. We need to be able to talk about these things and have these type of conversations, so people are aware that, the need is increasing, and you can do more there for those that can do those, that we can, and help lift everybody up, I think, from that point.
Great. Over to you, Neil.
I don't know if there's too much more that I can add, especially for a guy not bright enough to unmute his call. The one thing I would say from a donor perspective is that we're in a different time. If you just go back, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, and you think about how donations were made, you'd have a number of acid tests that you would have to sort of complete in terms of particularly around impact, right? And so you'd say, okay, well, I'll give you this donation, but I want to see it leveraged. And then I want to make sure that that end user never, needs a social service again, and you've transformed their life, and then you can document it with an academic paper in terms of how, but life doesn't really work that way. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people that are going to be relying on a food bank, who have, in particular now, who have a income that is like a fixed income, and they are being killed by inflation right now. And so can we talk about, well, the food bank relieved stress for that week. They got 3 days worth of food that week from the food bank, but they're going to have to be here next week, and they're probably going to have to be here the week after, because of the income that they're on. One of the atrocities that we have in the province is the fact that we legislate that anybody on disability must remain in poverty, significantly in poverty, for the rest of their lives. The poverty line in Toronto is about $2,100, and we provide $1,200 to everybody who is on disability. That's the maximum benefit that you can get. And so what are they supposed to do? They have to rely on friends, family, and charity. we just did a report called Who's Hungry? We released that a few weeks ago. And in that report, we talked about the fact that 1 in 5 food bank users spend 100% of their income on rent. And you might go, well, that doesn't make any sense. It does make a lot of sense. They rely completely on friends, family, and charity to be able to pay for food and transportation and clothing. And so it's a very difficult circumstance out there. And again, I think that, from a donor perspective, recognizing that there is going to be an ongoing need in the community, and the blessing that donation of food or the blanket on the street or the sandwich on the street or the coffee is to that person is an outward reflection of values. And yeah, there might not be an impact report from it, but rather a conversation or a smile from an individual who really needed it.
Yeah, thanks, Neil, for that. Obviously, food security leads or is connected to a bunch of other things that we're dealing with as a society: mental health, employment security, affordability around rent and housing, homelessness, all of those things. So, obviously Daily Bread is playing a pivotal piece of that impact and the challenge that people are experiencing today. From your perspective, any of the donors that you're speaking with, what's driving their giving towards Daily Bread Food Bank or some of those other issues that we're dealing with? And what are you hearing from them, either hopefully positively, but perhaps even on the negative side? What kinds of responses do you get when you're dealing with donors?
And just before you guys respond, can I just remind the participants, if you have a question, we'd like to end with your questions. Please put it in the chat and we will try to use 1 or 2 of those questions to pose to these two. Sorry, back to you if you want to respond to Dave's question.
Yeah, so in terms of drivers, sort of as I mentioned earlier, the closeness to home, people feel it already. They recognize, maybe historically they had a bit of a cushion, but maybe they've got just a few paychecks within their bank account, and maybe even less. And so there's a closeness to home, and so that is certainly a motivator. Here's where I think we need to applaud the media. The media has had a keen eye in terms of poverty, whether it's their coverage of food insecurity, their coverage of affordable housing, to the point that for the first time in our provincial history, all 4 parties in a provincial election talked about raising disability rates. And housing was the #1 issue of this past campaign. And so I do think that media is playing the role that they need to play, which is holding duty bearers to account when it comes to rights of housing, rights of food, and things like that are going unfounded, funded. So those are some of the drivers for donors coming closer. We are spending an increasing amount of time, as sort of mentioned earlier, about linking donors to advocators. We were very nervous about it. Should we say, listen, there needs to be a change to income security. There needs to be a change to precarious employment. And would our donors be offended if we sort of said, hey, these are systemic causes, and we started doing some testing. We started segmenting our donor database and segmenting and finding out group by group by group, people are absolutely in line with that. We have different donors who have different, it might be a personal desire that they have to be able to make a donation. And some of them are just really absolutely enlightened. We received a a $3 million donation last week. It's the largest in our history. It was an individual who made that contribution. It's hugely needed. Sadly, it will provide food for 2 months. That's how much food we're going through. But it was absolutely needed and so appreciated. And the guy said, "I do not want you to spend more than an hour in recognizing this donation." So he knows that there needs to be a little bit of recognition, but he didn't want us to spend more than an hour. That was his requirement. And he got it. He got that we're kind of busy right now getting the food in, food out, advocating, and trying to make a difference. And I was just deeply grateful for that very humble gift.
That's amazing. That's great. This question just came in from Christy, and so Rick and Neil, both feel free to address it as you're able to. But Christy's asking about organizations that are not necessarily on the front line. They're kind of outside the scope of immediate needs. So like arts and charities focused in the arts or in theater or, I guess music or perhaps cultural institutions, let's put it that way. Just curious, maybe Rick, are you seeing any of your clients looking at those categories as well? Those are sometimes largely underserved categories of the charitable sector as well. And then Neil.
Yeah, we're absolutely seeing people that, and again, as I mentioned, it's really what people connect with. We're hosting an event with TO Live next week and bringing in donors towards providing, towards the arts and that. And so we are involved with these sort of structures and things like that. We've got a bunch of our clients that are very much interested in doing those things. And again, like all our clients are different. They all have different backgrounds. And really a lot of times, when I put together the financial means to help them to make those donations, we are seeing a whole spectrum of things that are near and dear to them. I know from Neil's point, food and shelter are the two cornerstones of life. I mean, that is the most pivotal thing that we can provide for people. But other people do have, things that are important to them where, it's either, helping children and youth, working within the arts to maintain those sort of things and that. And again, really, it comes to what people are connected to and what's important to them. And when they give, those are the things that are why they're giving those things. They have a personal connection to them in some way. And for people that are giving, to the food bank, I think there's lots of people that may have had to access those things that got them through a tough patch. And those things are never forgotten on people. And, it's profound in how it'll move you. And when people have that ability, to then give, I would say that many people that are giving to things like the food bank or other things are people who have accessed them in the past and that. So, it really is an important part of, how we can do those things. But yes, we are seeing giving across the gambit of everything that is near and dear to people, which is wonderful because there are so many needs and so many great causes that we need to be able to fund, or else we don't have them, they go away. And it really does come from people donating and making those contributions to make those things continue.
Yeah. And maybe Neil, just before you answer, obviously donors have a wide spectrum of areas that they can give to, and many of them do give quite broadly. They might give to the arts or healthcare, but they'll also give to frontline work like Daily Bread Food Bank. When you speak to your donors and particularly their breadth of interest, what are the connecting points that you're seeing as far as that kind of a donor?
Well, we certainly are seeing a shift from, and I have a lot of sympathy for individuals who are raising funds right now in the arts and in the theater. There has been a shift. My mentor would often say that Canadians are philanthropic but not charitable. And what he meant by that is they enjoy seeing the major donors often enjoy seeing their name above a hospital wing or university or theater, and not so much on top of a food bank or on top of a men's shelter. And there's a lot of truth to that. And so as people have made this shift, we in the sort of social sector are working very hard to retain those donors and let them know that their contribution is making a difference. So again, I do feel for the people in those segments specifically. I believe that the most competitive sector of our economy is the charitable sector. I don't think there's any other industry that has 86,000 competitors, all with national presence through Canada Helps and all with great missions. And so, so I think that there will be some challenging roads ahead. So therefore, I'd stick to those basics of making sure that they understand clearly what their plan is to be able to retain the donors that they've got and attract new ones through that compelling case and a culture that supports that and a strategy to be able to leverage everything from those communities that is just so good for society. And the final part that I would probably do is sort of go with the trend right now. Many of the performers, many of the artists are struggling, and therefore, is there an opportunity to be able to leverage the current trend to be able to make sure that those institutions within the arts are do not go into a state of decline at all?
Excellent point, Neil. Thank you for that. Now, we did make a commitment to Neil, and we have like 2.5 minutes to fulfill that commitment. So Jim, why don't you want to take us to the runway here?
Yeah, why don't we just at the end of the call here, before we wrap, and just a few minutes here, why don't we take a moment to look up our local politicians or the ones that we've connected with, and actually just reach out and state some of these needs as Neil has stated it. Just as we wrap time today, I just also wanted to thank each of the panelists for your time and your responses. Rick and Neil, great to have your input on this. And thank you for joining online today, each of you who participated in the Lunch and Learn. I wanted to let everyone know just before we wrap that we will have another Lunch and Learn in January towards the end of the month after we can kind of get going in the new year. Well, the topic is going to be on digital technology transformation in the charitable sector, and have some panelists that will be able to speak to that, bring some ideas to helping you. But these ideas today have just been awesome to be able to understand better how we can address the ongoing need for increased donations, increased partnerships in these difficult times for many who are really finding it difficult to live on and operate on the little that is coming in. So I hear some good advice and counsel coming from those of you here, and we just want to know each of you as well. Cause Leadership is a management consultancy really specializing in helping you bring executive talent strategies and HR solutions, and also fundraising solutions related to addressing this issue. And we want you to just know that we're there for you if you need further support, further counsel, further direction in some of these matters. The last thing we'll do when we close the call within the next hour, you'll receive an event feedback survey, and it's just really to continue to have a feedback loop from each of you to continue to improve for next time for us. It'll take you like 5 minutes to complete it if you don't mind, just sending that your response, and that'll help us for our January Lunch and Learn as well. So as we just close now, can we just take a moment just while we're still on, and just right now direct you to look to the political leaders that you know, and maybe put a word of encouragement to them to activate their strategy. Neil, do you want to just word that more clearly? What would you advise us to ask them?
You know, in the subject line, just say, I'd really appreciate if you implemented your poverty reduction strategy. Lots of love, Jim. That's all you need to write. Like that's that simple. And some EA will write back. They'll take note of it. They'll write back and say, thanks for your note. The counselor appreciates comments from the community and all that sort of stuff. But just today's the day to implement your poverty reduction strategy. Lots of love.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for doing that.
Okay, no, that's great. And I'll just make some just final thanks both to Rick and Neil. Really appreciate it. I know, you know, the people that you're dealing with on a regular basis are making an impact. Your donors, your clients, and you know, the incredible work that Daily Bread is doing across our city with many different other member organizations and those donors that support it. So thank you both for that, and really appreciate your time today, your commitment to philanthropy, your commitment to charity, and we will follow up with our commitment to support the work that you're doing as well. So really appreciate it.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you for each of you, and we will say goodbye and see you in January, hopefully.
All right, excellent. Thanks,
All the
everyone.
best.
Okay, bye-bye.